Number 10. Hulk Smash? X-Men? This happened during World War Hulk. Hulk had been sent to Sakaar and believed that the Illuminati were not only responsible for sending him off-world, but also for destroying the planet that he had made his new home and his future family there as well. Coming back to Earth and pissed, he began to hunt down all members of the Illuminati, including those who weren't even at the meeting. Enter Charles Xavier. While Charles was not one of the members to condemn the Hulk as he was not in attendance, Hulk still wanted to know what Charles would have voted had he been there. Charles told him the truth, that he also would have voted to send Hulk off-world. Hulk wanted to hold Charles accountable for what he saw as his potential crimes, since, Charles didn't actually vote, but before he could take him away, the X-Men stepped in to defend the professor. Hulk then began to beat down any and all mutants or allies who would stand in his way. It was a slaughter. All this despite the fact that Charles wasn't even there, and these mutants really didn't have a say in the matter of Hulk being sent off-world to begin with. In the end, Hulk was shamed into stopping his attack and leaving Xavier be by the mutant Mercury. Thank goodness. Number 9. Schism. Schism isn't necessarily a bad idea on paper, but it was one of the darkest moments in X-Men history, so in a way it was the worst for the mutants themselves, in terms of in-canon, as opposed to, us readers. What went down here? Well, Cyclops and Wolverine fought and created a huge split down the middle between mutant kind, especially mutant students, as each had their own beliefs when it came to as how best to shape these young minds. What might seem odd about Schism is that it was about a divide between Psyche and Wolvie, who are not really known for being super friendly anyways, due to their infighting about, who should get a date Jean Grey. However, it should also be noted that Cyclops and Wolverine, despite both loving Jean, are actually considered to be pretty close and are good friends. That is until they get into a disagreement about how best to teach young mutants. Like I said, they've gotten into a lot of disagreements before that, but this one was pretty big. Wolverine thinks that they should be treated as kids, and Cyclops thinks they should be trained as soldiers. What makes it worse is just as a Sentinel attacks the mutant island of Utopia, Cyclops and Wolverine decided to fight one another over the differentiating standpoints as opposed to dealing with the Sentinels, which is, I know you guys are having a fight, but like a Sentinel's attacking? I feel like we should deal with that first. Number 8. Cyclops recruits X-23 for X-Force. X-Force is a team that is sometimes referred to as the X-Men Black Ops team. They go in and do the jobs that others are not willing to do. The more shady and morally questionable heroic stuff. X-Force originally started as Cable's team that went around dealing with situations and taking out people that basically Cable thought needed to be handled. But from there would evolve into a secret X-Men team that handled assassinations and less desirable jobs. At one point, it's Cyclops who puts the team together during the mutants' time on Utopia. He appoints Wolverine the leader, but also puts X-23 on the team against Logan's wishes. This is because X-23, Laura Kinney, has only known killing pretty much her whole life. She was made to be a weapon, and Logan wanted her to have a say moving forward in what she did with her life. He didn't want her to have to feel like she always had to be a weapon. She could be more than that. But Cyclops feels she's too useful to not have on the team. Needless to say, it was not a good look for Psyche, and Logan was pretty pissed. Number 7. The first live-action Juggernaut. While the version of Juggernaut from the Deadpool franchise appears relentless in a really great way, the first attempt at the character on screen was not so great. Even the actor that played Juggernaut in the Fox X-Men franchise, Vinnie Jones, appearing in X-Men The Last Stand, supposedly claimed he was even disappointed with the portrayal as well. The problem with this version of Juggy was that he wasn't really intimidating enough. Also, that outfit. I don't think it works great on camera. If it weren't for the Juggernaut's displays of easily smashing through walls, I feel like we'd have a hard time recognizing him here, even with him clearly stating who he is to the audience while he's in pursuit of Kitty Pryde. Number 6. Inhumans vs. X-Men. Possibly one of the weirdest storylines we've ever gotten, especially as Inhumans were kind of attempted to be utilized before in the comics to be like a backup to the X-Men. Not saying I don't love the Inhumans, by the way, but after Marvel sold the rights of the X-Men to Fox, they basically made an attempt to kind of catapult the Inhumans into popularity, and that really just didn't work out too well. The Inhumans were made by the Kree and were modified humans who basically get powers through a process called Terrigenesis, where they're exposed to Terrigen mists. They usually keep to themselves, so to have them fight any mutant group feels kind of weird straight out of the gate. The reasoning between them and the X-Men having beef? Well, it turns out that apparently Terrigen Mists are like poison to mutant kind, and despite the Inhumans attempting to work things out and come to some kind of peaceful resolution when mutant kind were accidentally hurt by mists released on Earth because they actually felt pretty bad about it, the two groups ended up in a war. What makes it even worse is that the catalyst for this war, the dramatic death of Cyclops at the hands, or rather the voice, of Black Bolt, is revealed to have been staged by Emma Frost to give mutants a reason to fight back against a group that never really wanted to fight to begin with. So what are we even talking about here? Number 10. The fate of Squid Boy. Squid Boy and his friendship with Juggernaut was one of the redeeming elements of Chuck Austin's run on the X-Men, which is pretty widely disliked among fans of the X-Men. Austin's run is also the one that featured the relationship which was highly controversial between Husk and Angel. However, one of the things that was pretty cool about his run was how Juggernaut was brought into the book and somewhat redeemed. Juggernaut even befriended Sammy, known as Squid Boy, a young mutant who was ridiculed at school for his appearance and came to join the Xavier Institute. Squid Boy would save Juggernaut's life and the two would become friends, with Kane even becoming like a father to Squid Boy, whose own father mistreated him as Kane's once had. Despite them both protecting one another, at one point Squid Boy stumbles upon a meeting that Juggernaut is attending with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Gasp. Tragically, Squid Boy did not know that Juggernaut was acting as a double agent for the X-Men. Causing a scene and accusing Juggernaut of being a traitor, Black Tom Cassidy reacted by killing the young mutant. What an end to that initially sweet and uplifting story. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list, be sure to give it a like and let us know down below what you think one of the worst moments in X-Men history is, both in terms of controversy or just in terms of bad things that have happened to mutants. Number 9. Beast's not so subtle disguise. At one point, the X-Men get kidnapped and brainwashed by Mesmero, forced to join the circus. At the time, Hank wasn't even really with the X-Men, but was instead a member of the Avengers. But when he answers a call from the mutants and finds the X-Mansion deserted, he still of course looks for his fellow friends and former and future comrades. While searching, Beast decides to adopt a disguise. This is already after Beast is covered in bright blue fur, so what disguise does he go for? Trench coat and a hat. You got it. Even stranger, for the most part, his disguise actually works. It's only after his hat is removed that even the brainwashed X-Men seem to realize that there's something weird going on with his appearance. Don't worry though, despite the fact that Hank is kinda awful at disguises in this story, he's still a brilliant and dexterous fellow who is able to help save the X-Men in the end. Number 8. Avengers vs. X-Men. Avengers vs. X-Men pitted two superhero groups both known for doing massive good and saving the world on countless occasions really, against one another. How do you even make these two groups fight one another? Enter the Phoenix Force. Avengers and X-Men decide to take one another on because they disagree on what to do with the Phoenix Force, which is headed to Earth to merge with its current ideal host, Hope Summers, the mutant messiah. The X-Men want to protect Hope but also think the Phoenix could be useful, while the Avengers think the cosmic power is too dangerous and should be destroyed. All in all, Avengers vs. X-Men created a lot of problems, especially for the X-Men going forward. It also is a big part of the later split between Storm and Black Panther, who were actually married at the time. While the X-Men and mutant kind were at least mostly united in this front, although, Wolverine had some conflicting feelings of his own about it, Avengers vs. X-Men was also considered to be one of the greatest clashing of ideals since the first Civil War event from 2006. Number 7. Fox. Fox was one of the weirdest X-Men to have never really existed, and also was pretty creepy considering the moves she put on Gambit. Fox attempted to seduce Gambit away from Rogue at a time when the couple were having some pretty intense intimacy problems. I mean, Rogue and Gambit have had intimacy problems physically for years in the comics, but I'm talking about intimacy on really all levels, including emotional intimacy. Emma Frost at the time was trying to provide a sort of couples counseling for them and offer them a free space psychically for them to connect romantically in ways they couldn't in the physical world at that time. Fox played on Gambit's struggles, flirting with him and offering herself physically to him. One, this was pretty messed up as Fox was actually a mutant student of his, and 2, it was really messed up because it was later revealed that Fox actually wasn't a student at all, didn't really exist, but was actually Rogue's adoptive mother Mystique in disguise, who didn't believe that Gambit was good enough for her daughter and later claimed to have been testing Gambit. Number 6. Cyclops kills Professor X. Now granted, this also happened as a result of the Avengers vs. X-Men story arc. Cyclops ended up killing Professor X because he was possessed by the Phoenix Force and ultimately had so much power with him that it basically corrupted him. But this was also not a great time for Professor X in comic book history, so even if you disagree with Cyclops' his actions here, and I think most people do, I think you can at least understand why this happened. This was following a time where many dark truths about Xavier and his lies to the X-Men were unearthed. Among them was the sentience of the Danger Room, itself an AI cyborg mutant, as well as the revelation in Deadly Genesis that Xavier had sent Moira McTaggart's mutant team into Krakoa only for them to perish. Quote unquote perish. A truth which Vulcan forced the Professor to confess. Professor X was on a path of redemption at the time of his death at the hands, or rather optic blasts, of Cyclops, but he was still overshadowed by a pretty dark time in his own history.
Coming in at number 10, we have the bloodthirsty vampire Wolverine. In an alternate universe where vampires have launched an all-out assault on the United States, most of the X-Men are bidden and mind-controlled by the Lord of the Vampires, Dracula. Unfortunately for Dracula, however, Wolverine's healing ability allows him to regain his own mental control despite becoming a vampire, and thus is able to overthrow Dracula and become leader of the vampires. Consumed by a bloodlust that amplifies his already pretty frightening rage, Wolverine and his vampire army are able to wipe out most other superpowered life on the planet, only finally being defeated by the combined forces of Doctor Strange and the Punisher as a vampire hunting combination. Coming in at number 9, we have the evil Iceman hailing from the Age of Apocalypse universe. In a world where Apocalypse has taken over mutant kind and only Magneto and a few X-Men are capable of fighting back, the usually optimistic Bobby Drake was forged into a heartless warrior, giving him much stronger control of his ice powers than other depictions of Iceman, and becoming a living streak of ice that can travel instantaneously through water. This version of Iceman would eventually betray his teammates and ally himself with Dark Beast, and was only eventually able to be defeated by having his head shoved inside of a furnace. Which I guess is one way to kill an ice-based villain, but geez, that's a little bit overkill. Coming in at number 8, we have the brainwashed Wolverine of Earth 14850. At one point in the regular Marvel Universe, Wolverine was captured and brainwashed by Hydra in order to assassinate the Avengers, but luckily was able to be deprogrammed before he did any real damage. On this alternate Earth, however, the deprogramming never took place, and Wolverine's killing spree of superpowered heroes was able to last for months. Armed with all of his incredible abilities, absolutely no remorse, and the addition of Hydra-developed teleporting technology that nullified even Wolverine's usual weaknesses, and this was a horrifying enemy that even the Avengers couldn't handle. Coming in at number 7, we have Basilisk, the twisted, mask-wearing variant of Cyclops. On an alternate world where anti-mutant sentiment is somehow even higher than the regular Marvel Universe, Scott Summers' backstory is made even more tragic. Killing 7 people, including his own parents when his powers first manifest, Cyclops is locked away in the prison Alcatraz and forced to wear a mask made of ruby quartz to control his laser vision. The evil governor of the prison even goes so far as to mutilate Cyclops and remove his eyelids, making the twisted basilisk mask the only method Scott has to control his deadly abilities, a favor that Cyclops would repay by killing the governor and launching a prison break that would eventually lead him back to this universe's X-Men. Coming in at number 6, we're taking a bit of a break from the comics with the Wolverine symbiote from the video game Spider-Man: Web of Shadows. In this game's story, Wolverine has traveled to New York City to deal with a growing symbiote infestation, and even briefly fights Spider-Man when he believes the wall crawler is actually Venom. Unfortunately for Wolverine, he finds himself overwhelmed by actual symbiotes on top of a church and attacks Spider-Man again as the Wolverine symbiote. With all of his usual healing abilities on top of all the usual symbiote enhancements, this version of Wolverine might just be the scariest he's ever been. Coming in at number 5, we have the Ultimate Universe version of Jamie Madrox, aka Multiple Man. Multiple Man's powers have always been a bit overwhelming, with the ability to seemingly create an unlimited amount of duplicates of himself as long as they're generated one at a time. In the Ultimate Universe, however, this power was pushed beyond its limits when Jamie allied himself with the Brotherhood of Mutants and created tens of thousands of bomb-wielding versions of himself with no regard for his own life. While the Ultimatum event featured many shocking moments, few are as existentially disturbing as literal thousands of clones strapping explosives to themselves just to wipe out several superhero bases. Coming in at number 4, we have the possessed Professor X from Earth 6141. During the event known as M-Day, when Scarlet Witch wiped out most of mutant kind, the extremely powerful telepath known as the Shadow King was able to escape the loss of his powers by transferring his mind through the multiverse to the alternate world of Earth 6141, where he was able to successfully possess the mind of this world's Charles Xavier before the X-Men were even formed. Combining both of their telepathic might, this version of Xavier turned all of his students into perfect killing machines, and placed them firmly under his psychic control, getting them to kill any superheroes who tried to interfere in the Shadow King's schemes. While eventually defeated by the team known as New Excalibur, this group of Shadow X-Men left their world shaking in terror. Coming in at number 3, we have the vampire variant of Storm, aka Bloodstorm. In an alternate reality where Storm was bitten by Dracula before discovering the X-Men, Storm came to Charles Xavier for help with her condition. Unfortunately, her bloodlust was too strong and she wound up feasting on both the Professor and Beast. Horrified at what she'd done, this version of Storm would eventually try and redeem herself after she found herself as part of an invasion force attacking the main Marvel universe. While she eventually bonded and made amends with the Beast of this dimension, her combination of weather controlling and vampire powers made Bloodstorm one of the more powerful X-Men variants that the regular X-Men have ever had to face.
Number 5, Cyclops and Emma Frost make out on Jean Grey's grave. Oh boy. Yeah, there are a lot of things that have not been great when it comes to Cyclops' history. Sorry, Cyclops. I love you, Scott, but you do some questionable things, man. I mean, he's done a lot of good things, but he's also been part of some of the biggest scandals in all of mutant history. Case in point, his psychic affair with Emma Frost, and following that, his making out on Jean's grave with Emma after Jean had died. Wolverine certainly was not impressed with any of this. While many still ship and love Cyclops and Emma together, even many of the fans of the couple would agree it was a pretty weird moment. However, Jean's ghost gave the couple her blessing, so I guess we're just supposed to be cool with it. I mean, I guess if Jean's ghost is fine with it, then we're just supposed to be like, yeah, alright, why not? Make out on that grave. You guys are in love. It's cool. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to see a part 2, because you know there's a lot of terrible things that have happened in X-Men history, please be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 4, Professor X and Jean Grey. In particular, Professor X's initial feelings about Jean back in the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby days of the X-Men. We all know that Cyclops, aka Scott Summers, has always had a thing for Jean, but when it comes to the classic X-Men team, he actually wasn't the only one. In fact, pretty much everyone was head over heels for Jean at one point. Maybe except Bobby, who back in the day did like to flirt, but mainly was in love with ice cream. I mean, Bobby was the youngest of the bunch, and even me, not necessarily being the youngest of any bunch, I still love ice cream, so fair enough, Bobby. You eat that ice cream. Both Angel and Beast also seem to hold a bit of a flame for the lone female member of the X-Men team at that time, with Angel actually being pretty close at times to winning Jean's heart. But that's not where it ended. Even Charles Xavier, Jean's mentor and teacher, was apparently in love with her? Why is this so bad? While at the time the X-Men came across as more young adults at times than teenagers, in retrospect it would be established that Charles, as a grown man, had come to Jean's aid when her powers first manifested and shielded her from them with mental blocks to protect her from basically the sheer power that would otherwise probably have destroyed her. So she was maybe 8 or 10, I think, when this happened, and he was an adult? Okay. Add in the fact that even back in the 60s run, Charles was her professor and Jean was his student, and the fact that Professor X chiefly blamed his lack of ability to walk as a reason why he couldn't, nay shouldn't, be with Jean, and it's all kinda weird and pretty gross. Look, Charles, you don't have to walk for people to love you, but also don't have crushes on your students, it's weird. Number 3, Archangel and Husk. One of the strangest relationships to have ever existed in the X-books. One of. Or at the very least, one of the most controversial was the one between Archangel and Husk. Why was it considered so weird? Well, Angel was one of the first ever X-Men on the original team back in the 60s. Now, time works weird in comics, I'll grant you that, but Husk was known to be the younger sister of Cannonball, who himself was a much later addition to the X-Men, first appearing almost 20 years after Angel on the New Mutants team in 1982. And Husk, Paige Guthrie, his younger sister, appeared 2 years later in 1984. She was believed to be in her late teens or maybe her early 20s, while Angel, although somewhat ageless, would likely be in his 30s at least, if not older, because yeah, he was around in the 60s, so we gotta do some fixing to make that make sense. And it was implied that he was quite a bit older throughout their relationship as well, just in the comics, in the context of the relationship and what they would say to each other. Add in the fact that these two got busy in the sky above the Guthrie family home, and yeah, you can see why this feels really problematic and weird. Number 2, X-Men Gold controversy. Oh boy, the X-Men Gold controversy. X-Men Gold was actually a series that many X-Men fans were really excited for at the time. It promised a fresh, new take on X-Men the fans were craving, but when it came out, the first issue's release was swept up in a whirlwind of controversy in regards to its first printing. This was because the artist, Ardian Syaf, who was said to have hidden political symbolism in the issue, which directly related to a protest in Indonesia against the Christian governor of Jakarta, known as Ahok. Overall, the protest was considered to be quite conservative in regards to political sides, and those protesting Ahok wanted him jailed for being a blasphemer when he referred to a passage in the Quran during his campaign. Now, he apologized for doing so, but people were still really angry about it, and Syaf was supposedly among those at the protest and decided to include the political and religiously charged numbers in the first issue of the book, which are also said to stand for a passage that is interpreted in Indonesia speaking against accepting Jews or Christians as Muslim leaders. So even though apparently there were a lot of things that were misconstrued with all of that, it still was just not great. It's not great. Number 1, Genoshan Mutant Massacre. The history of Genosha has pretty much been tumultuous and widely awful since the start. The island nation prospered for most of its history thanks to mutants who were born there and once identified had their free will stripped of them, all their rights taken away, and were basically used as free laborers for the benefit of the nation, no longer being considered citizens but the property of the Genoshan government once they were identified as mutants. Pretty terrible stuff. Eventually, the mutants on the island would rise up with some help, but even after that, it would not be easy to set things right. There was a lot of fighting that happened on Genosha even after the mutants were kind of trying to get their rights back. At one point, Magneto got ownership of the island nation and attempted to turn it into a nation for mutant kind, a place mutants could call their own, reclaiming it and turning it into a little slice of paradise for them. An attempt at what we have kind of with Krakoa today. Hopefully it ends better for Krakoa though. For Genosha, millions of mutants were murdered on the island after it was attacked by Cassandra Nova's Wild Sentinels. It was a brutal and dark moment in mutant history, with the island being put on quarantine so that even those who did survive and tried to get away were ordered to be shot on sight. A lot of people like to focus on House of M and M-Day, but Genosha was a mass extinction mutant event, and it was a really brutal attack. Number 5. Meet Daddy Nightcrawler. Probably one of the weirdest storylines we have ever had in comics happens to be one where we learned about the truth behind who Nightcrawler's father was. Did we need to know this? Did we really care about this? I mean, Kurt already had an adoptive family who are admittedly pretty cool, and he's got Mystique for a mom, which might not be as cool in terms of like Mystique being a good mom, but it's definitely interesting. But we also, I guess, had to give him a dad to help explain even more the way Nightcrawler looks and his powers. In a storyline where demonic mutants known as Neophim were pitted against angelic mutants known as Cheophim, implying that mutants are related to both heaven and hell, or at least some of them are, we learned that Azazel is a powerful, satanic-like demonic being who was actually Nightcrawler's father, and had only sired him in an attempt to free himself and his fellow Neophim from the Brimstone dimension where they were trapped. Number 4. Necrosha. The massacre at Genosha, which we talked about on part 1, was really bad, But even worse, it also paved the way for another tragic event when Necrosha happened. Tragic, scary, Necrosha's a lot of things. Necrosha was when Selene of the Externals, not to be confused with Marvel's Eternals, who are a totally different thing, decided to make her home base the devastated Genosha. Selene ended up taking control of all the dead left on Genosha, resurrecting them, and utilizing them as an undead army to attack the new mutant island of Utopia. Yeah, it was pretty bad. Not only does Selene seek to get revenge on the X-Men either and also conquer Utopia, but her plan here is to basically become a bona fide goddess who would be pretty dangerous and scary indeed. Number 3. Inferno from 2021. During the most recent Inferno event, a lot of truths were unearthed about the true allegiances of those who came together to create Krakoa, and just exactly who was behind the whole mutant island paradise. Now, we already knew that story, but not all mutants, in fact not many mutants, did. The truth was that the idea of what Krakoa is was founded by Magneto and Professor X, as well as their ally and friend Moira McTaggart, who we recently found out during the House of X series was actually a mutant. Moira claimed she wanted to help her fellow mutants, but in reality she planned to actually end mutant kind, which is what's revealed in Inferno. But instead of destroying them, she wanted to disguise her destruction in the guise of a mutant paradise, kind of giving them like one last hurrah as they would eventually die out, as per her plan. During Inferno, Moira's betrayal was brought to light and she was exiled from Krakoa. Number 2. Mutant Massacre. Now sometimes referred to as the Morlock Massacre, but back in the day it was simply known as the Mutant Massacre. This was before massive mutant attacks like Genosha ever happened, which is also what made this so much more shocking and horrible at the time. Although it happened on a smaller scale, the Mutant Massacre happened when Mr. Sinister in essence ordered the Morlocks be eradicated. He sent his team of marauders to handle them and attack, killing many who lived down in the sewers. It was, as it is called, a mutant massacre. For those unfamiliar, the Morlocks are less pretty mutants basically, ones who have dramatic physical mutations which often make it impossible for them to walk among humans on the surface world, at least without going unnoticed. So they tend to stick to their own kind and the sewers. Think the sewer mutants from Futurama, it's kind of what they're like. Morlocks, as such, sometimes are considered more antagonistic mutants who resent the mutants sometimes who are able to walk freely among men. Now, not all Morlocks are like that, and in reality, for the most part, they're actually peaceful and innocent folks who have been even more ostracized and rejected from the world than most other mutants. So they definitely didn't deserve to be massacred. It was really awful. Number 1. M-Day. M-Day has to have been one of the worst moments in mutant history. Although I actually gave Genosha the top spot on my part 1 of this list, that's because, I pretty much always talk about M-Day, we don't usually talk about Genosha, and I wanted to save that for a potential part 2, which I figured was coming, and here it is. Decimation is by far one of the worst things to have ever happened to mutant kind. Genosha simply doesn't get enough acknowledgement because it ended up being overshadowed by the devastation of M-Day, which happened only a few years later, with M-Day happening in 2005 and the massacre at Genosha happening in 2001. M-Day happened as a result of Scarlet Witch striking out at mutant kind after the events of House of M, where she attempted to create a reality where many heroes were happy, but after learning of its falseness, was once again rejected by all those she had basically tried to help. Namely though, Wanda was striking out at her then to be believed father, Magneto, who she claimed loved mutant kind more than he did his own family. Wanda said the words "no more mutants," and with that small utterance, depowered or destroyed millions of mutants the world over.
Coming in at number 2, we have one of the most powerful enemies the X-Men have ever seen with Brother Mutant. On Earth 127, a male variant of the Scarlet Witch, known as the Scarlet Warlock, attempted to cast a spell that would transfer Wolverine's adamantium skeleton to Magneto, thus giving Magneto an incredible power boost given his magnetic abilities. However, something with the spell went wrong, and the Scarlet Warlock, Wolverine, Magneto, Quicksilver, and the villain Mesmero were all merged into a singular being known as Brother Mutant. With all 5 of these mutants' powers combined into one villainous figure, Brother Mutant was such a powerful threat that a multiversal team of Wolverines had to be assembled specifically to stop him, just to ensure that all of that power wasn't unleashed on the rest of the Marvel multiverse. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the one and only Magneto from the Ultimate Universe. Unlike a lot of the other entries on this list, this Magneto variant doesn't have any additional powers or physical mutations to make him even more intimidating, but rather is terrifying just because of his sheer willpower. This version of Magneto is much more cynical and dark than the complex figure of the regular Marvel Universe, and when he believed his children had been killed by Doctor Doom, Ultimate Magneto was furious enough to begin a global genocide. Switching the polarity of Earth's poles with his magnetic powers and beginning the incredibly controversial event known as Ultimatum, this version of Magneto caused the deaths of millions of people and dozens of beloved superheroes, and was only finally able to be stopped when Cyclops put him out of his misery with a laser blast to the head.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Wild West themed Xavier Gang. In an alternate Marvel universe that bears an incredible resemblance to America in the 1800s, a band of outlaws known as the Xavier Gang are plaguing a small town in Arizona, with every mutant member of the team being individually mind-controlled by a distant and diabolical version of Professor Charles Xavier. Using this team of the X-Men as puppets made up of both superheroes and supervillains, this Western crook version of Xavier was only defeated once a multiverse-spanning team of X-Men showed up to put an end to his mind-controlling ways. Coming in at number 9, we have the bloodthirsty Vampire Wolverine. In an alternate universe where vampires have launched an all-out assault on the United States, most of the X-Men are bitten and mind-controlled by the Lord of the Vampires, Dracula. Unfortunately for Dracula, however, Wolverine's healing ability allows him to regain his own mental control despite becoming a vampire, and thus is able to overthrow Dracula and become leader of the vampires. Consumed by a bloodlust that amplifies his already pretty frightening rage, Wolverine and his vampire army are able to wipe out most other superpowered life on the planet, only finally being defeated by the combined forces of Doctor Strange and the Punisher as a vampire hunting combination. Coming in at number 8, we have perhaps the most infamous X-Men palette swap with Dark Beast. Originally hailing from the alternate timeline known as the Age of Apocalypse, this version of Hank McCoy was a twisted mad scientist working under the tutelage of Mr. Sinister, striving to create the most powerful mutants possible, no matter the cost. Although this messed up future would be prevented by the X-Men, Dark Beast was wily enough to find a way into the main Marvel universe and avoid his existence being erased. Ever since, he's been a persistent thorn in the X-Men's side and a particular burden on Beast, who would much rather that someone didn't use his genius for evil.
Number 7, Wolverine. Wolverine has had a pretty crazy past, so it's no surprise that he's gone down a few dark roads in his time. In the movie Logan, for example, we see two Wolverines battle it out, and it's so gory and so wonderful. But in the comic Age of Apocalypse, Logan goes from being an X-Men to the Horseman of Death. Yeah, Apocalypse actually had Wolverine square up against Sabretooth in order to see who becomes this new Horseman. Wolverine came out on top, and Apocalypse restored the adamantium to his skeleton. Upgrade time, let's do it. And to make matters worse, Apocalypse replaced Wolverine with a scroll so the X-Men wouldn't notice. Now, of course, there's many more X-Men who have become Horsemen of the Apocalypse, such as...
Coming in at number 6, we have the brainwashed Wolverine of Earth 14850. At one point in the regular Marvel universe, Wolverine was captured and brainwashed by Hydra in order to assassinate the Avengers, but luckily was able to be deprogrammed before he did any real lasting damage. On this alternate Earth, however, the deprogramming never took place, and Wolverine's killing spree of superpowered heroes was able to last for months. Armed with all of his incredible abilities, absolutely no remorse, and the addition of Hydra-developed teleporting technology that nullified even Wolverine's usual weaknesses, and this was a horrifying enemy that even the Avengers couldn't handle.
And at number 5 is X-Force. X-Force. The X-Men Black Ops team. Cyclops' own little hit squad. There are more than a few not so great things this sub-team has done. Cyclops forcing X-23 to be on the team, performing assassinations, etc, etc. It's all bad. But after Cyclops disbanded the team, Wolverine kept it going on his own, and they took on a bit of a sinister task when they decided to take out a younger cloned version of Apocalypse to prevent him becoming a threat. This particular assassination almost didn't didn't go through, but then Phantom X just popped the little clone in the head. Yes, it's incredibly messed up, but hey, then he cloned the clone and raised it in a virtual reality to give it all the nurturing it needed to be a good apocalypse.
Coming in at number 4, we have the twisted Bobby Drake, aka Iceman of the Age of Apocalypse universe. In a world where Apocalypse has taken over mutant kind and only Magneto and a few X-Men are capable of fighting back, the usually optimistic Bobby Drake was forged into a heartless warrior, giving him much stronger control of his ice powers than other depictions of the character, and becoming a living streak of ice that can travel instantly through water to lethal effect. This version of Iceman would eventually betray his teammates and ally himself with Dark Beast, and was only eventually able to be defeated by having his head shoved inside a furnace, a surefire way to finally melt this evil Iceman.
Number 3, Cyclops. Scott Summers has been a leader of the X-Men since the beginning. He carries the knowledge that Xavier gifted him when he was a teenager. He was always struggling to control his powers growing up, and his history is pretty tragic. So when Scott and Emma became the new co-headmasters of the school, Cyclops led the X-Men, and he was doing a pretty good job. He was working to destroy this negative image that the public gave the X-Men. And as time went on, the X-Men name was being tarnished, so he thought it was best to separate mutants from humanity. Yeah, he thought he'd separate them and then rule the mutants on an island nation known as Utopia. Magneto even gives him props for uniting all the mutants. I mean, this is a big deal for him. This starts going south in the Schism storyline, where Cyclops sends out child soldiers on these assassination missions. He has the mindset that mutants need to train to be soldiers rather than students, but they're like 12 years old, so it's like, okay. Eventually the team gets divided and Scott ends up taking on the powers of the Phoenix Force, fighting the Avengers and taking out Xavier, resulting in him being imprisoned.
Coming in at number 2, we have the one and only Magneto from the Ultimate Universe. Magneto might often be an enemy of the X-Men, but in recent years has allied himself with them more often than not. This version of Magneto, however, is much more cynical and dark than the more complex figure of the regular Marvel Universe. And when he believed his children had been killed by Doctor Doom, Ultimate Magneto was furious enough to begin a global genocide. Switching the polarity of Earth's poles with his magnetic powers and beginning the incredibly controversial event known as Ultimatum, this version of Magneto caused the deaths of millions of people and dozens of beloved superheroes, and was only finally stopped when Cyclops put him out of his misery with a laser blast directly to the head. And finally, coming to our top spot, we have another version of Professor Charles Xavier, or more specifically, the part of his mind known as Onslaught. For years, Professor X has done all he can to achieve peace and prosperity for mutant kind, while not allowing his anger at humanity to get the better of him. But after all this time of psychically repressing every dark and evil thought he ever had, Xavier had made the perfect ticking time bomb. And when he briefly had a mental battle with his best frenemy, Magneto, a portion of Magneto's less held back personality combined with all of the darkness in Xavier's heart and created one of the most dangerous psychic creations of all time, the villain known as Onslaught. A personality made up of the worst possible versions of both Professor X and Magneto, Onslaught is the pinnacle of what can happen when the X-Men go bad.
Kicking off the list at number 10. Juggernaut. Kane Marco made his first comic book appearance in X-Men issue 12. When Kane and Charles Xavier were serving together in the same unit, but when Kane was under fire, he ran off to take cover in a nearby cave. The cave was actually home to the lost temple of Sidorak. So Kane grabbed this glowing ruby from the lap of an idol. Apparently he's never seen an Indiana Jones movie. He read the inscription. Apparently he's never seen a horror movie. And he possessed the power of the Crimson Bands of Sidorak, becoming a human Juggernaut. Then an explosion went off, and then Kane the Juggernaut was now trapped under the rubble, and Xavier just took off. So after Kane dug himself out, he destroyed an entire village, with the previous man who had held the Juggernaut mantle, Jin Taiko, being destroyed as well. Now at one point he joined the X-Men and accepted Xavier's offer to live at the Xavier's school. After a young boy he befriended named Sammy meets his fate, Kane embraces the Sidorak energies once again and went back to his villain ways. And before we go on to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be great. It helps the studio out quite a bit. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to this X-Men list. Number 9, Mystique. Raven Darkholme made her first comic book debut in Miss Marvel issue 16 back in 1978, so she's been around for quite a while, although most of her history is quite secretive. Her powers are quite interesting and first came to be when she was around 12 years old. Now one of those powers being of course that she can metamorph. So she can shapeshift into literally anybody, doesn't matter what size, age, gender, whatever the case. She's so good at shapeshifting and becoming somebody else that she can even copy your retina patterns and of course, your fingerprints. So she can definitely get into your phone in numerous ways. She constantly betrays the X-Men. She's so flippy floppy. She joins the team for selfish reasons and then she leaves all over again. It's part of the thing. Number 8, Colossus. Making his first debut in Giant Size X-Men issue 1, Colossus grew up in Russia with his brother Miko and sister Alina. And when a runaway tractor was about to take out Alina, he saved her life with his powers. And then of course that got the attention of Charles Xavier. So he joined Charles in his school, and then when the legacy virus took the life of Alina, that plus the fact that he was stuck in this giant metal mode, stuck in the X-Men mansion, it was his mental breaking point. He tipped to the dark side. He left and figured the best place to be was with the Acolytes, with Magneto and Avalon.
Number 7. Wolverine. In Wolverine Origins number 29, it's revealed that Wolverine was originally sent to assassinate Xavier as a member of the secret Weapon X experiments. Xavier, obviously able to read Wolverine's mind, sees the attack coming and thwarts it by brainwashing the aggressive Canadian into becoming a member of the X-Men. He removed a bunch of old memories, implanted some new ones, and basically left Wolverine's mind a confused mess. But Xavier managed to get what he wanted, which is a powerful weapon to fight for his cause, so good job, dude.
Number 6, Gambit. Making his first appearance in Uncanny X-Men 266, Remy LeBeau was a mutant child who was kidnapped from the hospital by members of the New Orleans Thieves Guild. So off the bat, not a happy start to his life. They referred to him as the White Devil. So before he joined the X-Men, he had a pretty shady past, and after he had become a member, it was revealed that before he had worked for Mr. Sinister, and Gambit was actually the one who was responsible for putting the Marauders into the New York sewers where the Mutant Massacre happened. So, okay. He was also one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen, like I said previously. He took the place of the horseman Death, and he even refused any sedation during this process in order to make sure Apocalypse doesn't toy with his mind. What a badass. Dude's hardcore. His original plan during this was to keep an eye on Apocalypse from the inside, but the transformation did alter his intentions as well. He ended up rescuing his old self when he remembered his love for Rogue, and he claimed he was both Death and Gambit at the same time. What a troubled man.
Coming in at number 5, we have the group known as Sinister's Six, and surprisingly, this isn't just a bunch of Spider-Man villains. A group of 6 red-eyed clones of the X-Men working for Mr. Sinister, this villainous group did have a few run-ins with the Wallcrawler, but only during the series known as Spider-Man and the X-Men, so it all works out. These evil clones were initially an intense obstacle preventing the real X-Men from getting closer to Mr. Sinister's schemes, but would ironically eventually be defeated by the same condition that seems to always follow Spider-Man related clone stories, cellular degeneration. Better luck next time, Sinister Six.
Number 4, Archangel. Warren Worthington III. He started out as the accustomed hero known as the Avenging Angel. And then once Xavier got his attention, he recruited him as the 3rd of the 5 founding members of the X-Men, alongside Cyclops, Iceman, Beast, and Marvel Girl. He developed a pair of feathered wings that grew out of his back, giving him the ability, of course, to fly. He became a member of X-Factor alongside other X-Men, but he lost his wings thanks to Cameron Hodge. See, Apocalypse saw this and he took advantage of the hero. He brainwashed him and turned him into Archangel, the first horseman of death in the comics. He eventually broke free of Apocalypse's control, but over the years he would flip-flop back and forth into the evil hands of Apocalypse. He at one point actually had almost replaced Apocalypse after his death. Yeah, he's a force you do not want to mess with.
Number 3, Professor X Mind Wipe Mark II. It's not just colleagues that Professor X has manipulated. No sir, not by a long shot. But in Giant Size X-Men number 1, Charles Xavier has to put together a brand new X-Men team thanks to the fact that his original X group is being held captive by the living island Krakoa. However, we learn later that this new team wasn't the only one, because Professor X already sent out another new squad of X-Men to save his original team, and they were all horribly killed. Vulcan, Sway, Darwin, and Petra all seem to perish at the hands of Krakoa, and rather than admit his poor decision making, getting a bunch of mutants killed in action, Charles erases the minds of everyone who knew about this team, including Vulcan's older brother, Cyclops. which came and bit him in the butt when Vulcan turned out to be alive and came for some revenge.
Number 2, Magneto. Making his first appearance in X-Men 1 back in 1963, Magneto is a mutant with the ability to generate and control magnetic fields. He's a master of magnetism. He was a close friend with Professor X, but of course they came to a disagreement over the idea that humans and mutants could coexist peacefully. Like I just mentioned, he was a fan of when they got divided. He gave Scott Summers props for doing this, so he's clearly on board with this idea. And obviously his horrible childhood makes a fair point for said argument. He always believed that mutants were superior to humans. He was the one who created the Brotherhood of Mutants and the Acolytes. He worked with the X-Men before. See, when Professor X needed to leave Earth, Magneto stepped in to take his place and teach his students how to use their powers. After this, he became a hero in a way. He was guiding these new mutants. But again, he's one of those villains that constantly flips back and forth in the comics, and I'm really hoping he somehow is the one responsible for all this madness in WandaVision. After all, now that Quicksilver is somehow in the picture from the Fox universe, one can only hope we'll see some more X-Men, and one can only wish that Magneto will come through and maybe give his daughter a little talking to. And finally, number 1, Jean Grey. The Dark Phoenix, of course, she is number 1. Jean Grey is an Omega level mutant born with telekinetic and telepathic powers. She was also one of the OG members of the X-Men. Now, seeing the potential in Jean's strength, the Phoenix Force attached itself to her while she was in danger during a space mission with the Fantastic Four. It's X-Men 101. Like literally, the issue is X-Men 101. Dark Phoenix has now entered the chat. Uh-oh. So much power. Okay, this dark, powerful cosmic force started to change her for the worse. She ended up destroying a solar system that, kind of killed billions. And then she took her own life in order to keep the universe safe. Now, a few years later, it was revealed that it wasn't actually the Jean Grey that had died. No, just the Phoenix as a separate entity that had taken over her mind and all that jazz. The Phoenix Saga is one of the biggest transformations to an X-Men member, and we even got to see all this go down on screen. Now, of course, we'd have to put her at number 1.
Number 10, Cyclops and Wolverine's Schism. Schism was basically Wolverine and Cyclops fighting over ideologies, particularly ideologies surrounding the young mutants' minds that they were subjecting to danger literally all the time. Wolverine believed in a more nurturing parental approach, while Cyclops had the idea to treat these youngins like soldiers. Cyclops' approach is bad enough, but the whole initiation of this fight was another low for the mutant Boy Scout. Cyclops founded Utopia, giving mutants a place to live, but a place that was now being threatened by a new Hellfire Club that attacked a group of young X-Men at a museum opening, taking hostages. Cyclops and Wolverine were racing to get there, but were too slow, so, to Wolverine's horror, Cyclops ordered teenage mutant Oya to de-life all the Hellfire soldiers, which she did successfully. The fight between Cyclops and Wolverine then split the mutant community down the middle. Number 9, X-Men vs. Inhumans. The Inhumans were an offshoot of humanity that were experimented on by the Kree, gaining powers from a process called Terrigenesis, using Terrigen mists. Now it turns out, these mists are basically poisonous to the mutant population, and mutants were hurt when mists were released on Earth. The Inhumans in response felt pretty bad and were all for some kind of peaceful resolution to the issue. But Emma Frost made a whole plan that all the mutants, including the X-Men, agreed to except for Beast, Forge, and Rogue. Emma also basically staged the passing of Cyclops at the hands of Black Bolt of the Inhumans to get the mutants to fight back against the Inhumans, who weren't even trying to fight in the first place, causing a whole war between the two groups. It makes no sense, but that's how it is, I guess. If you guys love mutants and these videos, be sure to drop a quick like on this video. It's all you gotta do to show us your support. Thanks, nerds. Number 8, Danger. While working to upgrade the Danger Room by installing Shi'ar technology one night, the Danger Room spoke to Professor Xavier and asked, "Where am I?" Realizing that the Danger Room had mutated and become alive, but still needing to train his X-Men, Professor Xavier made the choice to just ignore and hide the life form from his X-Men. Not smart, since later, the Danger Room began to control other machines in an attempt to gain a body. After sending an Omega Sentinel to battle the X-Men, the Danger Room convinced a student at the school, Wing, to de-life himself, which resulted in the breaking of its prime directive and the physical manifestation of the being named Danger. taking on a female appearance. After locking all of the students in a nightmarish simulation, Danger battled and defeated the X-Men, then went on to do a whole bunch of much worse things herself.
Coming in at number 7, we have the possessed Shadow Professor X from Earth 6141. Isn't that a mouthful? During the event known as M-Day, when Scarlet Witch wiped out most of mutant kind, the extremely powerful telepath known as the Shadow King was able to escape the loss of his powers by transferring his mind throughout the multiverse to the alternate world of Earth 6141, where he was able to successfully possess the mind of this world's Charles Xavier before the X-Men were even formed. Combining both of their telepathic might, this version of Xavier turned all of his students into perfect killing machines and placed them firmly under his psychic control, getting them to kill any superheroes who tried to interfere in the Shadow King's schemes.
Number 6. The Phoenix 5. In the 2012 crossover event Avengers vs. X-Men, the Cosmic Phoenix Force was coming to Earth, and when it arrived, it was split up into 5, giving our heroes a new problem in the form of the Phoenix 5. The quintet consisted of X-Men veterans including Cyclops, Emma Frost, Namor, Magik, and Colossus, who began reshaping the world according to their will until they themselves became a threat. As each member of the 5 fell, those left standing got more and more powerful, leaving Scott and Emma, who were becoming more tyrannical by the minute. To stop the two of them, Professor X was recruited by Magneto, but the cosmic entity had consumed Scott and even basically made him betray Emma Frost to gain more power. After a mental battle between him and Xavier, Scott used his power to actually take the life of his father figure, mentor, and dear friend, becoming the Dark Phoenix until he was defeated by Hope Summers and Scarlet Witch.
Number 5. Bishop. Lucas Bishop. He is a time traveler from a dystopian future, and his goal was to travel back in time to the past in order to stop an unknown traitor amongst the X-Men. Interesting, very interesting. So he's come from that dark future to change it. Sounds like a good way to mix things up, that's for sure. Now this was when most of the mutant population is depowered by the Scarlet Witch. Then the child Hope was born, the first mutant born since. Well, it turns out that this kid is the reason Bishop is going back. See, that kid would end up taking millions of lives in the 6-second war. So Bishop tries to take out the child, which makes him the traitor all along. Time travel hurts my head, oh my god. So Cable, another time traveler from a different future, protects Hope. Bishop fails at taking out Hope, but he does take down Cable, creating a new future where Cable is remembered as a hero for protecting the child, and Bishop was remembered as the villain. That's tragic and also very confusing.
Number 4. Professor X Mind Wipe. Professor X has a history of just impulsively wiping and manipulating people's minds, which never goes well in the long run, but for some reason, he just keeps doing it, even to those he considers friends and colleagues. Reed Richards, with whom Xavier worked with on the Illuminati, which is a whole other bad time, feared for his son's life and built a machine that would take away a mutant's powers. Reed's son, Franklin Richards, is an incredibly powerful being with reality warping abilities and was believed to be a mutant, which he wasn't, but that's another story. Professor X took exception to the machine that Reed built, so he completely wiped away the knowledge of the machine from Richards' mind. He made sure that Richards would never be able to build another one ever again, tampering with the mind of a man he used to call a friend.
Coming in at number 3, we have the vampire variant of Storm, known fittingly enough as Bloodstorm. In an alternate reality where Storm was bitten by Dracula before discovering the X-Men, Storm came to Charles Xavier for help with her condition. Unfortunately, her bloodlust was too strong and she wound up feasting on both the Professor and Beast. Horrified at what she'd done, this version of Storm would eventually try and redeem herself after she found herself as part of an invasion force attacking the main Marvel universe. While she eventually bonded and made amends with the Beast of this dimension, her combination of weather controlling and vampire powers made Bloodstorm one of the more powerful X-Men variants that the regular X-Men ever had to face.
Number 2. Beast and Terra Verde. After the mutant nation of Krakoa was founded with its various different organizations and groups, the former X-Men Hank McCoy was put in charge of the intelligence wing of X-Force, which was the mutant nation's equivalent to something like the CIA, for example. This means that Beast is now one of the shadiest damn mutants you ever did see, and one of the most prominent examples of just how shady he now is comes in his response to an attack from the Republic of Terra Verde. Beast modifies the telefloronic biotech of the country of Terra Verde to take complete control of that country and its people. From there, he used them to seed telefloronic listening devices in embassies and basically used the state as a puppet for intel gathering. Hank transformed the nation into a literal puppet state and robbed its people of their free will. And in at number 1 is the secret of mutant resurrection. This one is gonna split a few people, and I'm kind of even on the fence about this one. Basically, if you don't know, in recent comics, mutants on their new nation of Krakoa have devised a means of resurrecting their own using a group of 5 mutants known, surprisingly, as the Five. Resurrection in comic books happens on an almost absurd basis, but this proven method of consistently bringing back the dead is different, and the mutants are very aware of that fact and even go to great lengths to keep it a secret from the rest of the world. The reason kinda makes sense, as 1, they can't really bring back non-mutants anyways, and 2, the amount of people who would be outraged at the fact that the mutants are allowed to revive themselves but us regular humans have to suffer through all the pain and loss of losing a loved one and can't do anything about it, it would just cause mass outrage and further turn the world against mutants. Still, devising the means for resurrection and not even trying to inform the world? Kinda hella sus.
Alright, let's get counting. Number 10 took advice from a serial killer. Sort of. In one of the volumes of Fool Killer, Deadpool makes a cameo appearance when he visits his pal Gregory Salinger, who is the mass murderer Fool Killer, a man who kills anyone he deems a fool. Though he wasn't the first to don the mantle Fool Killer, Salinger has his own interpretation of what makes someone a fool. Often he has associated foolishness with those who are obsessed with the material or anyone who he is considered mediocre. Quite dangerous, as mediocrity can be very interpretive. He tried to take out both the Defenders and Spider-Man and almost killed himself after hearing someone remark that anyone who would take on Spider-Man was a fool. He spent some time in a mental hospital after being declared criminally insane. Later, he got his degree in psychology and, during Deadpool's cameo, attempts to give him a therapy session. Deadpool also reminisces about the time he wanted to kill Salinger, and he ties up his girlfriend, who he confesses he really doesn't like, even going so far as to suggest that she should just die. Number 9. Forced cannibalism on Archangel. When Archangel was left wasting away, Deadpool stepped in to save him. At first sight in the comics, this appeared to be a kindness of Deadpool. He was trying to help his buddy to stay alive, effectively feeding him and saving him. Then Angel wanted to know what he was eating, and it was revealed that Deadpool was actually feeding his teammate his own flesh without Angel's consent. In other words, he was forcing Archangel into an act of cannibalism. So sure, he was saving his life, but you should probably give your teammate the opinion as to whether or not they want to eat your flesh. I also can't imagine that Deadpool would taste great. Number 8. Killed classic literary heroes. In Deadpool Killustrated, which is not considered canon, Deadpool extends his wrath for the Marvel Universe to even any literary figures who inspired the very characters he has hunted. He goes after Moby Dick, Scrooge, the Musketeers, Sherlock Holmes, and even puts an end to the characters of Little Women. Harsh. This may be an awful deed that Deadpool accomplished, but it also is a must-read, as Cullen Bunn is the writer behind the 4-issue series. Cullen Bunn is also known for his non-Marvel comic book work in the horror series Harrow County, which you should also read if you haven't already read it. Number 7. Killed his own parents. Of course, this wasn't of Deadpool's own volition per se. That is, he didn't know that they were his parents, as he had been brainwashed by the butler and had his mind wiped. Still, he returned to his parents' home in Canada, who again, he didn't remember. He was sent there to kill them as a test to see how much control Butler had over Wade. Upon his arrival, he experiences some deja vu, and Sabretooth tells him that he could always just, not follow through on the job, starting to feel a little bad for Deadpool. But Deadpool doesn't really understand why he wouldn't do the job. A job's a job, he says. But the Canadian superhero team Alpha Flight shows up and interrupts them. Later on, Deadpool actually returns to his parents' house to finish the job. He seems to recognize the home and some items in it, but he still does not flinch, removes the smoke alarms, and sets the home ablaze with his sleeping parents inside. Number 6. Enslaved a man. Chef Deadpool has kind of become almost an alternate or alter ego of Deadpool's himself. He has his own pop figure and is what people refer to when Deadpool is sporting his chef's hat, and usually he's cooking something up as well. In case you didn't know, Deadpool's regeneration factor also pretty much gives him a bottomless stomach, meaning he can eat an insane amount of food and that you shouldn't expect to win an eating contest against him anytime soon. He loves pancakes so much he even made over 300,000 of them one time. But more than pancakes, one of Deadpool's favorite foods to eat is obviously the chimichanga. I get it, I had my first chimichanga earlier this year because of Deadpool when I was in Arizona, and they are by far one of the best things that you will ever eat. So good. His love of chimichangas drove him to do something dastardly though, when he is shown keeping a man he calls Paco as his slave in a tiny oven where the man is forced to make him an endless amount of chimichangas. The man just wants to go home to his family, but Deadpool reminds him that the oven could get a lot hotter should Paco cease cooking up chimichangas for him. Number 5. Wore fur, and real fur too. Okay, so this is less to do with the actual wearing of real fur specifically, and more to do with the fact of who the fur used to belong to. During the events of Deadpool Kills the Marvelverse, Deadpool eliminates almost all of the X-Men by using Cyclops' optic blasts after he's captured Professor X. Somewhere in between this and when Wolverine shows up to avenge his fallen X-Men, Deadpool manages to get his hands on Beast's fur and fashions himself a headpiece. Wolverine's healing factor appears to have met its match in Deadpool's carbonadium sword, and Wolverine is taken down by Wade while he wears Logan's fallen teammate's fur like a sadistic trophy. How dare you wear Beast? Fashion faux pas. Number 4. Used his daughter as bait. For those of you that don't know, Wade Wilson has a daughter, little Ellie Camacho. Wade generally tries to keep some distance between him and Ellie and her mom for their own safety, unless apparently there is a copycat on the loose bent on ruining his reputation. Then he thinks it's perfectly fine to put his daughter in harm's way. When Madcap was running around pretending to be Deadpool, Wade came up with a plan to catch him, inspired by the film Jaws. He would use Ellie as his chum, aka bait, to draw out the shark, aka Madcap. The plan worked, but it put Ellie in a great deal of danger. Fortunately, Quicksilver was on standby to save her, but still pretty reckless parenting on Wade's part.
In a 10, Deadpool. Little is known about Deadpool's life before the zombie plague arrived on Earth 2149. At some point though, he was infected and he attacked the Silver Surfer. He most likely fled the attack but also escaped the power cosmic zombies from getting himself incinerated and killed. He later was transported from Earth 2149 to Earth 616, calling himself the Merc with half a mouth due to his lack of most of his jaw, and exhibiting a wide range of knowledge. However, he was torn apart by some blades after Kale put some tricky maneuvers, resulting in Deadpool now reduced to only a head and being contained within armor. He managed to escape from armor headquarters with the help of Simon Garth by using the base teleporters to escape to the bottom of the sea, where Deadpool's head infected all of the menfish. Garth was compelled to travel to the island nation of Tiano in the Caribbean Sea, where he told Black Talon about the zombie plague. But like, look, normal Deadpool is bloodthirsty enough, but a zombie version that gets reduced to only a head and then still keeps going, that's freaking nuts. I'm also gonna not try to hold back my swears because it's Deadpool. It's fucking Deadpool. So sorry, editor, who has to deal with this.
No, it's fine. Fine.
And at 9, Dead Man Wade. Obsessed with feeling pain, Dead Man Wade Wilson became one of Apocalypse's Pale Riders, a team formed by Apocalypse's chief assassins. His teammate Danielle Moonstar took great pleasure in inflicting pain upon him, pretty kinky. But when Apocalypse learned that Nightcrawler was seeking out Avalon, he sent Wade and the other Pale Riders to follow him and destroy the refuge. Along the way, Danielle's torture of Wade annoyed their teammate Damask to the point where she strangled Moonstar to death. Watching that woman get killed unnerved Wayne even further. However, this version of Wade is also in constant pain, and even though he is in constant pain, his healing factor keeps him alive, meaning that he will never truly be freed. That is until Nightcrawler teleports his head off of his body, resulting in Wade dying despite being able to regrow limbs to a much easier extent than his 616 version. But hey, what am I gonna do? It's comics. And it ain't Dreadpool. In the reality of Earth 12101, the X-Men brought Deadpool to Dr. Benjamin Brighton in an attempt to cure him of his insanity. Unbeknownst to the X-Men, however, Brighton had in actuality been brainwashing his patients to do his bidding as opposed to curing them. Brighton's treatment failed to brainwash Deadpool and instead destroyed his inner voices, replacing them with a single voice that knew the entire universe was just a lie and encouraged him to kill non-stop. He then killed Dr. Brighton by smashing him into a release form after stating all the form needed was Brighton's stamp of approval. And by stamp he meant his blood. He then killed everyone in the asylum and then blew up the building. In order to end it all, he began killing the rest of the heroes of the world, and he started by going after the Fantastic Four, killing Reed Richards and the Thing first, then proceeding to kill the Human Torch. But Susan Storm caught up to him and blew his head off with a force field. But while she was grieving over the death of her family, Deadpool regenerated his head and killed her. Because of course he did. This version is a maniac, and honestly, I'm here for it. And at 7, Dogpool. Dogpool was once a dog known as Wilson, who was used as an animal test subject for Mascara X, which was intended to be a mascara that continually replenished itself after only one application. Instead, Mascara X disfigured Wilson and gave him the ability to heal from any wound. The lab owners didn't realize that he had acquired this ability and tossed him in a dumpster. Wilson tore free of the trash bag and wandered around, rejected by all those who saw him, until he threw himself in front of a car. A circus truck saw it happen and stopped for him, and immediately recognized the potential in his regenerative abilities, and he became the circus's starring act. He went from being exploited by makeup companies to exploited by the circus. The death-defying hound, Deadpool. He worked in the circus until the Deadpool of Earth 616 showed up and recruited him for the Deadpool Corps. But a goddamn dog version of Deadpool? Hell yeah, that's horrifying. It's a fucking dog that enjoys killing people from what I saw. And he can't die. Like what the hell do you think? It's gonna be cute? And at 6, Galactipool. Galactipool is a member of the evil Deadpool Corps. He is seen to attack the remaining Deadpool Corps and their allies after they defeat the evil Deadpool Corps that was originally sent to kill them. But he's taken out when Lady Deadpool deliberately crashes the B. Arthur into his head. But let's be honest. Even if he did die, a combination of Galactus and Deadpool is certainly a terrifying concept. Like, if we talk about it, I feel like it's still giving this guy too much power. Like, what sounds even the slightest bit okay about this version of Deadpool? The only reason he isn't higher on this list is because we didn't really get much of an opportunity to see his powers in action. But assuming he had all the powers of Galactus, this is probably the strongest version of Deadpool there is. But this isn't the list of the strongest alternate versions of Deadpool, it's scariest. And while this idea is scary with no real situations to back it up, we don't know if this is a truly scary version in practice. Halfway through, in at number 5, Wolverine Pool. Wade Wilson from Earth TRN 1946 was bonded with adamantium to his skeleton by Weapons Plus, their version of the Weapon X program. He was later recruited by Deadpool for his army. He killed Deadpool Pulp before the arrival of Galactipool. He was attacked by Deadpool with a grenade from which bugs came out of and then ate all of his flesh, leaving behind only a skeleton and claws, which is horrifying. His powers are seemingly the same as Earth 616 Wolverine, but like with Deadpool's body. So, I mean, okay, it's weird because he looks like Deadpool, but he is also Wolverine. It's f***ing weird, okay? Wolverine Pool's healing factor, though, is most likely weaker than the 616 version of either Wolverine or Deadpool's healing factor, which makes him less dangerous, but come on. A combination of Wolverine and Deadpool is something that we should all fear, and most likely do fear. I'm surprised Deadpool didn't make this a thing at the end of Deadpool 2, though, when he was correcting everything that he did wrong, including the Green Lantern movie, which was actually Ryan Reynolds, but hey.
Number 10, Deadpool Dinosaur. The evil Deadpool Corps are a group of villainous Deadpools originally led by an alternate Deadpool, Dreadpool. They aim to eliminate all Deadpools across the multiverse. Deadpool works to stop them and annihilate this villainous group in the story Deadpool Kills Deadpool with the help of his own good team of Deadpools, known simply as the Deadpool Corps. Deadpool Dinosaur is accompanied by his own Moon Boy, who looks a lot like Logan in the face, if I'm being honest. Is this just me noticing this? This version of Moon Boy also fights from Deadpool Dinosaur's saddle with a big gun. The two are basically an alternate version of Moon Boy and Devil Dinosaur, with, of course, some Deadpool mixed in there. Number 9, Deadpool. This version of Deadpool is basically a combination of former evil AIM leader MODOK and Deadpool himself. One can assume he has the brilliant mind of MODOK, but also has the brilliant fighting skills of Deadpool, even with his tiny, disproportionate arms. Not only does Deadpool seem to fight with swords, but he also has 2 turret firearms on his head. While MODOK stands for mental organism designed only for killing, Deadpool supposedly stands for destructive engine of assassination, despite panpygoptosis, obsessed with opponent liquidation. Number 8, Venom Pool. In a story that has continued through various What If issues, we get to meet Venom Pool. Venom Pool is an alternate version of Deadpool from the alternate Earth of 90211. Here, Deadpool ends up becoming bonded with the Venom symbiote during his time with the Beyonder, following a run-in with Peter Parker, who was bonded with the symbiote at the time. The symbiote leaves a defeated Peter Parker for Deadpool and bonds with him. Later on in his life, this is a path that leads Deadpool to end up killing all the heroes of his universe, whom he does not find attractive. He does let the attractive ones live. I guess that's something, I guess. Following a therapy session with Doc Samson, who this version of Deadpool also promptly kills thereafter, he realizes he needed to be true to who he was. This allowed Venompool to accept that who he was a massive jerk, and prompted him to use a weapon called the Retcon Expungifier to wipe out the entire universe. Basically, he's in the running for being the biggest jerk of all the Deadpool alternates. Number 7. Cesspool. We don't know that much about Cesspool. Like many of the darkest alternates of Deadpool, Cesspool was part of the evil Deadpool Corps. What we do know of him is that he has a terrifying appearance and mutation. He's completely covered in mouths with a razor sharp teeth and uses these to try and devour his opponents. Yipes. This is like something straight out of a horror movie. Number 6. Galactipool. This alternate version of Deadpool was too dark for even main continuity Deadpool himself. Galactipool shows up just as we thought the fight was coming to a close between the Deadpool Corps and the evil Deadpool Corps. Galactipool is a combination of Galactus and Deadpool, and Wade wondered where in the heck the evil Deadpool Corps even found an alternate like this Galactus Pool. Fortunately, despite him likely having I guess some kind of intense cosmic power, alternate Deadpool, Lady Deadpool, manages to defeat Galactipool using the Deadpool Corps ship, B. Arthur. Sadly, this was the end of B. Rest in peace, B. Number 5. Wolverine Pool. What happens when you take Deadpool and Wolverine and mix them together? You get Wolverine Pool. Wolverine Pool comes from the alternate Earth of 1946. Wolverine Pool is the ultimate Weapon X program weapon. He is a version of Wade Wilson who had adamantium bonded to his skeleton. He belonged to the evil Deadpool Corps and was killed during a fight with the non-evil Deadpool Corps. It is assumed that he of course has a healing factor, but not one strong enough to regenerate himself when reduced to just a skeleton, and likely a healing factor that was weaker than both the main continuity Wolverine and the main continuity Deadpool. Number 4. Red Tool. Red Tool is actually not from an alternate Marvel universe, but is actually from DC Comics. Oddly enough, while Marvel's Deadpool was created by Rob Liefeld and Fabian Nicieza to be a parody of DC's Deathstroke, DC then decided to themselves parody Marvel's own parody of their character, creating Red Tool, who is a parody of Deadpool. He's a parody of a parody. Still, just because we are stuck in a weird perpetuation of parody doesn't mean that Red Tool has to be a super light and fun character. Although he kind of is that too. Red Tool is dark in the fact that he only fights with tools, including power tools, making his physical conflicts also appear a lot more gruesome than his Marvel counterpart. And he doesn't have a healing factor, instead he just can't feel pain, due to having a part of his brain removed, which also makes him somehow even more disturbing of a character than Marvel's Deadpool. Pretty impressive actually. Good job DC.
And at 4. Evil Deadpool. The origins of the being known as Evil Deadpool are actually tied to Ella Whitby, a British psychiatrist obsessed with this superhuman mercenary Deadpool. She collected numerous parts of Deadpool's body that he had lost over the years and kept them in her freezer. When Deadpool found them though, he threw them in a dumpster in disgust, which is weird because I mean you're Deadpool, why are you disgusted? It's your own body, but whatever. The parts eventually thawed out, and since it still had Deadpool's healing factor, they all decided to fuse together into a single person. Evil Deadpool hijacked the private plane of an American businessman and traveled to the United States around the same time the original Deadpool did. And the two crossed paths for the first time after the evil Deadpool blew up Deadpool's favorite chimichanga joint, and they fought until they ran out of bullets. Both Deadpools agreed for a second round at Canarsie Park though. Their second explosive encounter caught the attention of Captain America, who arrived to the scene after evil Deadpool had escaped. But yeah, he's the whole reason for like the whole Deadpool Corps, so pretty fucking scary dude. Getting close to the end, and in number 3, Death Mask. After a revolutionary procedure performed by Reed Richards removed a lethal brain tumor, Wade Wilson became a super genius and used his newfound intellect to erect a criminal empire. Wade began wearing armor styled after Dr. Doom and went by Death Mask. After killing Deathwish, which was Victor Von Doom, who was the Deadpool of this reality that the Deadpool of the mainstream continuity was actually quite fond of, Death Mask decided to take down his alter ego. After being defeated, Death Mask made a contract with Mephisto to unleash monsters to Earth, including the demon Infernal Hulk. Not to mention that he has the powers of Deadpool and Dr. Doom, with an even cooler color scheme than the original Dr. Doom. But ultimately, in at number 2, Venom Pool. Venom Pool is an alternate reality version of Deadpool from Earth 90211. He is the combination of Deadpool and the Venom symbiote. Being a part of Earth 90211, he is part of the reality Beyonder loves partying in. A reality that's perpetually stuck in the 1980s in many regards, much like my father. Venom Pool is the Beyonder's go-to party animal, until the party gets boring for the Beyonder. But Deadpool was actually originally meant to kill Beyonder before discovering how much he liked the partying lifestyle. And once Spider-Man showed up demanding that the Beyonder remove the symbiote, this is when Deadpool becomes Venom Pool. He's later seen in one of the evil Deadpool's evil Deadpool Corps, and he is presumably killed shortly after this point, but we still don't know. His appearance changed rather drastically in the time between What If Venom possessed Deadpool number 1 and Deadpool kills Deadpool number 2. In his initial appearance, Venom Pool looked like like he was a cross between Venom, Deadpool, and Rick James, and in his recent appearances he looks like Deadpool but with like a Venom mouth and more ripped. And finally, in number 1, Poison Deadpool. The Poisons are a species of crystalline extraterrestrials spawned by the Poison Queen, originating on Earth 17952. The Poisons spent an unknown amount of time as prey for larger, stronger creatures before discovering that they could assimilate symbiotes and their hosts to become more powerful. While hunting the Venom symbiote, they were discovered by an incarnation of Doctor Strange, who bonded to the symbiote and proceeded to recruit an army of venomized superheroes, anti-heroes, and supervillains from across the multiverse to stop the Poisons. However, the Poisons saw this as an opportunity to swell their ranks, and most of these recruits were either killed or assimilated. When Venompool was summoned to the Earth dealing with these Poisons, he ended up willingly surrendering himself to a group of Poisons, thinking that the host's original personas were not completely extinguished, and banking on his insanity, granting him additional resistance to this process. This theory was proven correct though, as though his body was consumed to create Poison Deadpool, his mind remained intact, and he was able to suppress that of the poison that had consumed him. So while Deadpool was uncertain how long he could suppress the Poison's psyche, he helped the Resistance infiltrate the Poison's lair, which I mean has gotta be one of the most Deadpool things that you could fucking do. Like, I'm super overpowered with the symbiote, so I'm going to willingly give myself over to these things that could potentially take over my mind, but I don't fucking care, because I'm gonna be even more powerful, and then if I am crazy enough to just not have to deal with it, then I'm just gonna help the good guys, because I don't fucking care. Jesus. Deadpool, man.
Number 3, killed Phil Coulson. Anyone that kills Phil Coulson, that's a huge... It's bad. So bad. This mission is given to Deadpool by Captain America, who is later revealed to have been working for Hydra all along. You know, Hail Hydra and all that. Deadpool has always looked up to Captain America and as such excitedly accepts the mission, though he doesn't quite understand why he's required to take out one of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s finest agents, but he trusts that Cap has a good reason. In the comics, Deadpool's point of view is also interspersed with Coulson's point of view, and we see the tragic juxtaposition of two men who admired Captain America and everything he has stood for, but who have different information in regards to who Cap really is. Coulson knows that Cap is aligned with Hydra at the time and knows what he has planned. He is seeking to get the word out and even pleads with Deadpool to question the orders he is given, but alas, Coulson is unsuccessful in swaying the mercenary and ends up dead anyways. R.I.P. Coulson. Number 2, killed the entire Marvel-verse. This didn't happen even just once, by the way. Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe was so popular that it quickly transformed from a one-shot into the Deadpool Killogy, comprised of Deadpool Killustrated and Deadpool Kills Deadpool as well. The first time this happened is because Wade was locked up by his friends in an insane asylum for his own good, but also for kind of the good of everyone else, because you know, he can be pretty annoying. This was overall a bad idea though, as it resulted in Deadpool realizing that he and everyone else in Marvel were fictional characters trapped in a comic book, and he broke himself out, deciding that he needed to free everyone by killing them. The next time around it was less of Deadpool's fault, as he seemed like he was the victim of some brainwashing. Number 1, Wolverine Origins. I know we can't fully blame Deadpool for this one, and that he made amends for this version of Deadpool by killing him at the end of Deadpool 2, but I just can't make a worst things list revolving around Wade Wilson without mentioning this vile atrocity. It hurts my eyes anytime I just even think of it. Ugh. In Wolverine Origins, our first insight into Wade Wilson's character is actually pretty promising. The Merc with a Mouth lives up to his reputation of being an expert killing machine who can't stop cracking wise. But then he undergoes some experimentation that takes everything that we love about him away. His mouth is sewn shut and he's fully under control of Stryker, and is now called Weapon 6. I don't know. His katanas are now Wolverine-like blades that emerge from between his knuckles. Great. Just what Deadpool likes to be known as, a bad Wolverine ripoff. Number 3, Headpool. Headpool is the version of Deadpool from the Marvel Zombieverse of Earth 2149. He is aptly named Headpool because in the end, that is all that's left of him. A head. But a head who is still very much alive, that is, and would still very much like to eat you. This version of Deadpool was also not confined to just existing in the alternate Earth of Earth 2149. He ended up making his way to Earth 616 while he still had most of his full body actually. He ended up making his way to Earth 616 while he still had mostly his full body actually. He was thought to have been completely decimated during a fight there, but it turns out he survived, but simply had lost the rest of his body and was now just a head. Number 2. Dreadpool. One of the darkest alternates around, Dreadpool is the version of Deadpool who appeared in Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe. He is from the alternate Earth of 12101, where he was driven even more insane than he already is. A therapist known as Dr. Benjamin Brighton attempted to brainwash Deadpool so he might use him for his own means. However, this failed, and instead ridded Deadpool of his standard inner voices, replacing them with a single voice. This voice in his head seemed fully aware that nothing in the Marvel Universe was actually real, and encouraged Deadpool to free everyone from this fictional prison or fictional reality by killing them all off, which Deadpool then proceeded to do. Basically, Dreadpool is from Deadpool's darkest timeline. Number 1. Evil Deadpool. Evil Deadpool is an alternate Deadpool from the main reality of Earth 616. He is sort of a Franken version of Deadpool, who was created by the deranged and psychotic Dr. Ella Whitby. Ella Whitby accidentally helped to create him from storing bits and pieces of Deadpool's body, which had been lost throughout his life while he fought. She collected these because she was obsessed with Deadpool. She was also madly in love with Wade. Though they were stored in her fridge, they were likely part of her shrine of collectibles of Deadpool. In the end, Deadpool found these parts in her fridge and tossed them out. As they thawed in the garbage bag he disposed of them in, they came to life and rejoined together to create Evil Deadpool. A version of Deadpool that is evil and just an all-around complete jerk for the sake of being one, whose fighting skills rival the real Deadpool and who also has a backwards arm, which actually proves to be surprisingly useful in fights for him.